In this video we will implement some basic background music as well as some basic feedback for the shooting mechanics so that we can spawn a muzzle flash as well as the explosion prefab and the explosion sound when we hit an object, and it will work for our enemy as well as for our player. Okay, let's get going. This video is part of the series of videos about creating a 2D top-down tank game. We will explore different features of this game, each as a standalone video. Hi, I'm Peter and welcome to Sunny Valley Studio Tutorials. Our tank game has no sound and we do not get any visual feedback when we try shooting or when the bullet hits something. It lacks what is called juiciness, which I believe stands for the sounds and the visual effects that informs the player that the action that they have performed had some effect in the game world. Let's create a simple background music for our game for starters. We will start by creating a new game object in our hierarchy. Let's call it background music. Let's add to it a component called audio source. We are going to make sure that it is set to play on awake and to loop. And in the project files for this video series, we have the audio files, and in the audio files we have the superpowers, and there is a theme 15 which I really like, so I will use this, but you can use any other theme. Now I will set the volume to be something like 0.05, and let's check out how it sounds in our game. Let's press play. And the music started playing. Great. Now if you want to get more control over the audio, there is in the window audio mixer, which can be used for that purpose, and you can read more about it in the documentation. We are not going to use it in this tutorial, but I suggest that you get familiar with it. First of all, I would like to implement some kind of explosion feedback, so when our bullet hits the object, be it the tank enemy or the obstacle, I would like it to produce an explosion effect and later some sound. To do that, we are going to create a new game object in our hierarchy, and let's call it explosion. Okay. We will want to add to it a sprite renderer, a animator, and we will use the animations to produce this effect. Now if we go to our sprites and to Kenny top down, and in the retina folder we should have multiple sprites that can be used for the explosion, and we are going to use those. Now I really like those with the smoke effect, so I will use those sprites for our explosion when our bullet hits something. Now to use those for the animation, we will need to have an animation clip created, so let's go to our assets, let's create a new folder, animations, and let's right click, create, and we are going to search for the animation. Let's call it explosion animation. Great. Now for our animator we need to have the animator controller, so let's create a new animator controller as well, and let's call it explosion animator controller. And I'm going to drag it into our explosion animator. And now I will want to go to the top menu, window, animations, and let's open the animator window. Now I want to drag the explosion animation here, and this will be set to be orange, or you can set it through right click and set as the default state. This will be the default animation for this object. Now all we need to do is go again to the window, animations, and open the animation window, and here we will want to drag our sprites for our explosion animation. So let's go back to our sprites, to our retina folder, let's find our explosion animation, explosion smoke 1 to 5, and I'm going to drag it into our animation window. If we go back to our scene view, and if we select our explosion and click F to focus on it, we will see that now we should see those animations, but they are on the wrong sorting layer. So I will select the sorting layers, and we should have the special effects sorting layer on our explosion in the sprite renderer. So I will select this, and now you can see that here is our explosion. Now I will want to copy the last frame, select it, use Ctrl C to copy it, select the next frame and Ctrl V to paste it, so that we can see it, because otherwise this will disappear as soon as it appears on our screen. That's why we need to duplicate it and now only after it goes to the next frame it will disappear. So I will select all of those frames and I will drag them to about 0.25. And now this should give us a pretty fluent animation. Great. So now, last thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that we can trigger this animation. And as this is the default animation, if we press play, it will be played. Let's see. Okay, here it was, but it has stopped in the last frame. So we would like to destroy it after we play this animation. Now to do this, we are going to go to our scripts folder, and we should have our destroy util, which is a script that allows us to destroy the game object when we call destroy helper method on it. So to apply it, we are going to select our explosion. We are going to drag our destroy util onto our explosion and go to our animation window. And when we reach the last frame, we are going to use event. This is the button to add an event. And through this event, we can call any public method that is on this game object on any script of this game object. And here we can see the destroy helper. So now let me disable this explosion. Let me go to the scene, to the game view, uncheck maximize. Now if we press play, we will see that if we enable this explosion, it will disappear after it finishes playing the animation, and it will disappear from our hierarchy. It will be destroyed. Great. So now we know that our explosion is working correctly. We can drag it to our prefabs folder. And let's delete it from our hierarchy. Now all we need to do is spawn this explosion somewhere. So to do this, we are going to go to our scripts folder and we are going to create a new script. Let's create a right click, create a new script. And I'm going to call this script object generator random position util. And this script will allow us to randomly generate our explosion, constraining it with a radius. So let's open this script up in Visual Studio. Great. Now I want to delete the update and start methods. I will want to have two fields here. First one will be object prefab that we will want to generate at random position. And the second one will be float radius, which will be the radius defining the circle inside which we want to spawn our object prefab. Next, I will want to have two methods. First one will be getRandomPosition, which will simply use random.InsideUnitCircle, which will generate a point inside unit circle, and we are going to multiply it by the radius of our circle, and add to it the vector2transform.position, which is the position of our object generator. And the second method is random2D_rotation, which will simply generate a random rotation for our explosion, so this will add more variety to the appearing explosions. Now, what we want to do is simply instantiate our objects. We are going to have a virtual protected method getObject in case we want to implement an object-pooled object generator, so we can substitute it for getting the object from the object pool instead. And the createObject method will be public, and this will simply generate the random position, get the object. This object will be called impact object, and we are going to set its position to be the random position and the rotation to be the random rotation. Now, one last thing that we may want to do is to simply draw a gizmo using onDrawGizmos to depict what is the radius of our explosion appearance so that we can set it up properly. Just before we finish, let's set the radius to be something like 0.2f by default, and we should be good to go. Let's go back to Unity. Okay. And now, how are we going to instantiate this object? Well, we have in our prefabs our bullet game object, and if we focus on it, our bullet has the bullet script on it, and the bullet script drives how our bullet reacts when it is colliding with other objects. So I will want to go to this script, edit the script. Great. And we have set our collision layers, so our onTrigger enter will only be triggered when it collides with any object that is on the layer that the bullet can collide with. So we do not have to worry about which object does it collide with. We only want to know when it is triggered. So to do that, we are going to create a Unity event here. And since we did not import Unity engine.events, we need to right click on it, quick actions, and say using Unity engine.events to be able to use the Unity events class.
So now all we need to do is slide it down to where when we call on trigger enter, and we want to call on hit ?.invoke to check if anything is listening to this event. If some method is listening to this event, we are going to call invoke on it. Great. Now since our bullet is a prefab, I want to open it up, and I want to add here a new game object, and I want to call it impact feedback. Okay. Here I will want to add our object generator script, and I will select our object as the explosion, and I will set the radius to be 0.2, so you can see that around the bullet we are spawning our object. And what we can do is simply move it a bit to the front of our bullet. When it collides with the front, it will generate our explosion feedback. Now, last thing that we will need to do is to assign to our bullet on a hit event our impact feedback. So let's add here an event. Let's assign our impact feedback as the object, and as the function, let's select our object generator, and we should have create object method. Now we can Ctrl S to save the prefab, and let's go back to our Unity, and let's delete the bullet prefab from the hierarchy. So now if we press play, we should see that if we hit an object with our bullet, it generates an explosion. Let's drive towards our tank, and we can see that it works as well for it because it is reusing the same bullet prefab. Great. Now still we do not have any explosion sound for the bullet hit, so we are going to implement it next. So let's reopen the bullet prefab, and we would like to create a new game object. So let's create it even here. Let's call it impact sound, and let's add to it an audio source. Okay, if we go to our audio, we should have the 398283 file called explosion shot, and this is the shot that we are going to use, and we are going to simply assign it to our impact sound as the audio clip. Now we want it to be played on awake because we are going to instantiate this impact sound just as we do with the explosion. And again, we want to set the volume to be a bit lower, so 0.1 should be sufficient. Now let's create a prefab out of this, but before that we will need to create another script that will destroy this game object when the audio source stops playing. So we are going to create a script. Let's right click, create a new C# script. Let's call it destroy on audio finish playing. Let's open the script up in Visual Studio. Okay, great. I'm going to delete the update and start methods, and I will paste the code that we will use. First of all, we want to get the audio source that we want to monitor, and we do this in the awake by using the get component of type audio source. Next, in the start, we will simply call a coroutine that will wait for the length of a clip before it calls the destroy game object method. If you are not familiar with coroutines, I encourage you to check the documentation for those, because those will allow you to create twins, so animations inside the code, so we can perform some code, wait a bit. So as you can see in, for example, this example, we can wait for 0.1 second before we continuously call this for each loop until it reaches the end of it. So basically we can create small animations, or in our case, wait for the time of the clip being played before we destroy our object. Okay, let's go back to Unity. Okay, so back with the impact sound game object, we will assign to it our destroy on audio finish playing script. And as you might recall, this will wait after we call start method on it. It will wait for the source clip length, so source is the audio source we have, before it calls destroy game object. And the impact sound will start playing on awake, so a bit earlier than we call the start method, but not too much earlier, so we can be safe to assume that the audio clip will be there in the audio source, and we can get the length from this clip, so the length of time it will be played, and after this time it will be destroyed. So last thing that we will need to do is to drag this impact sound to our prefabs folder and delete it from our bullet, because again we only want to spawn it when our bullet hits something.
Now, of course, we could now reuse the object generator random position util to spawn our game object, but I believe it would be much more useful to create a custom script that instantiates game object, because then we can reuse it and we do not really need to set random position or random the rotation to our impact sound game objects. So let's go to our scripts folder, let's right click, create a new C# script, and let's call it instantiate util. And let's open it up in Visual Studio. Great. Again, here we will have a public game object, and this will be the object to instantiate. And we will have one method public void instantiate object. It will not take any arguments, and all it will do is it will call instantiate, and it will instantiate the object to instantiate. And this will be it for the script. This will be the script that will allow us to instantiate our impact sound. Let's go back to Unity. Okay. Let's go to our bullets, prefab, impact feedback, and we are going to add here our instantiate util. We are going to select our game object, so the prefab, our impact sound, and we need to select our bullet, add another listener to the onHit event, drag our impact feedback, select this time the instantiate util, and we are going to call instantiate object on it. We can Ctrl S to save the prefab, use this arrow to go back to our main hierarchy, and now if we press play, we should hear the sound when we hit our obstacle. You can hear that there was the sound played, and you can see the icon here appearing that it was instantiated if you have the gizmos on. And again, it will work per our tank and as well for our enemy. Great! So right now, if we perform a shot, the user doesn't really know, beside the spawning of a bullet, that the shot was performed. So it would be useful to add some muzzle flash and to add some sound that the bullet was shot. So let's implement those. I'm going to stop playing, and what I will want to do is I will want to go to our tank prefab, since our tank prefab is used by our player as well as by our AI agents. Our tank prefab has the tank turret, and this has only the tank barrel, which allows us to spawn our bullets in this spot. Now what I will want to do is I will want to add to this tank turret two game objects. One will be sound feedback, and the second one will be muzzle flash. Okay. So for our sound feedback, all we need is a audio source, and we are going to assign a sound here. We should have in our audio folder, in our Kenny assets, I have misspelled it, so tank should, and this will be the sound. And this is the sound of our bullets being shot that we are going to use. So again, we are going to select our sound feedback, our tank underscore shot from the Kenny assets folder. I'm going to assign it to the audio clip. Now we do not want to play it on the wake, because we are going to play it from our turret script, from our turret tank turret game object. Now this script doesn't output any Unity events, so again we will need to open it up and add Unity events to it. Great. Now at the bottom of the list of fields, we are going to add Unity events. I will have on shoot, on reload, on can't shoot, and on reloading. The last one will be important for the UI that we will implement soon enough. Now, again, we will need to right click on the Unity events, quick actions, and say using Unity engine.events at the top to be able to use this class. Now, first of all, we are going to go to our start method, and when we are in the start method, we are going to call on reloading, and we are going to question mark dot to check if anybody is listening to this event, and we are going to pass the current delay. So this will pass the 0 here, so we can reset any UI element that is not set to be 0, so it is displaying that we are still reloading. Now we are going to slide it down, and in the update, when we are checking if we can shoot, we are going to call on current delay. When we are reducing the current delay, we are going to again copy the on reloading call, and we are going to update the UI. So this only runs when we can't shoot. Now all the action happens in our shoot method, so here we are going to add the remaining events, and after we perform all the shots we are going to call on shoot. So this will allow us to only once invoke our on shoot event, not per every barrel but rather per one shot. And again we are going to call on reloading event to update the UI about the current reloading time, so current delay. Great. Now, of course, we have one more event which is called on can't shoot. And I believe we are not using the on reload event, so we can delete it. So on can't shoot will be called when we call our shoot method and the can shoot is false. So we are going to add to else to this if statement else. And here we are going to call on can't shoot .invoke. So this will allow us to inform the player that the tank is in the process of reloading and we cannot really shoot right now, so maybe play some sound, for example. Great, let's save it, let's go back to Unity. Okay, if we select our tank turret, now we should see those additional events that we have. Now, all our feedback is for the shooting, so we are going to add in the on shoot another listener. We are going to drag our sound feedback, for example. We are going to select our audio source and we are going to call play to play the sound. Now, we haven't implemented anything for our Muzzle Flash, so let's do that now. For this, we will need to have a sprite renderer and we will need to have the animator. Okay, and those will be useful to create what we want. Again, for the animator, we will need to go to our animations folder and we are going to right click, create, and we are going to select animation controller, and this will be Muzzle Flash animator controller. And we will want to create an animation for it, so right click, create, and we are going to select the animation, and let's call it Muzzle Flash animation. Great. Again, we are going to select the Muzzle Flash game object, assign our Muzzle Flash animator controller. We're going to reopen our animator window, drag our Muzzle Flash animation to set it to be the default, and now we are going to go to our animation window and we are going to search for the Muzzle Flash appropriate sprite. So let's go to our sprites folder, to the retina folder, and if we slide down we should see the shoot large, shoot orange, and shoot red, and shoot thin. So we are going to use those sprites. I'm going to select those and I'm going to drag them into our animation window. Now, one thing that we want to set here is when we select our sprite and sprite editor, we should make sure that our sprite has the pivot point in the top center point for every sprite that we want to use. Since this will make our life easier, we will ensure that the sprite appears and this goes only forward from where our object starts that has the sprite renderer. So let's exit the sprite editor. Now if we select our scene view, if we select our Muzzle Flash, we can drag it forward, and now if we play our animation, you can see that those are rotated. So what we will want to do is first of all set the sorting layer to be the special effect, and next we are going to want to flip it. I think it is X, no, it is Y axis. So now we should be able to see that we are spawning all those effects, and the smallest, the short thin is not set properly, so I think we can go without it. Let's delete this frame from our animation, and now we should have all those sprites. And what I would like to do is add at the front of the red sprite 2 more yellow sprites. So now our animation will go as follows: the small yellow one, the orange, the red, the big one, again the small one and the small one. And what we can do is drag those across the timeline to be around 0.7. Okay, and now our animation will play something like this. Okay, what we can do is simply disable this Muzzle Flash and select our tank turret, add on shoot event to our turret script, and select our Muzzle Flash, which is disabled game object. And what we can do is simply select game object set active, and we are going to set it to be true. Now this will not be all, but let's save it and let's go back to Unity and let's press play to see what is the result. So now if we shoot, the animation will be played, but unfortunately it will stay on. So we will need to have an additional script that will simply disable this sprite renderer or this game object Muzzle Flash when we finish playing the animation. So let's stop the game. Let's go back to our scripts folder. Let's right click, create C# script, and let's call it disable util. Okay, let's open it in Visual Studio. Okay, all we will want to have here is a disable object method that will call game object set active to be false. Okay, let's save it. Let's go back to Unity. Great, I'm going to go back to prefabs folder, reopen the tank prefab. I'm going to select the Muzzle Flash, and I'm going to add here our disable util game object. I will want to open the animation window, and when we finish playing the animation, I'm going to select the event, and I'm going to select the method disable object. Now that's all, so let's save it. Let's go back to Unity, to the main hierarchy. Now if we press play, we should be able to see that if we shoot, the Muzzle Flash gets disabled. What's going on? And if we drive towards our tank, since we have been using the prefab tank for the enemy and the player, it will work for both of those. Great, so this is it for our shooting mechanic, for the juiciness of our shooting mechanic. In the next video, I would like to add some feedback to the movement system, so maybe we can add some engine sound, so when we are still it is quieter, when we move it is louder, as well as I want to leave some track marks or skid marks behind our tank so we can see that our tank is moving and where it was. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you want to support me, please take a look at my Patreon website. Check out my Udemy course about creating a 2D top-down shooter using the URP and Unity 2020. There will be a link with a discount in the description if you are interested. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Take care!